Hello, and welcome to Revisiting Archive, the channel where we explore the fascinating history of the world. This is the third video in our series on Portuguese history, and today we are going to uncover the turmoil in the Portuguese monarchy, exploring the mysterious assassination of King Carlos and King Manuel II's tumultuous reign. Now, let's dive into the history of Portugal, a country that has a rich and diverse past, shaped by many civilizations and cultures. Do you know how it all started? Do you know how a small corner of the Iberian Peninsula became a powerful and influential nation that explored and colonized the world? Do you know how the ancient Romans shaped the culture, language, and identity of the Portuguese people? If you are curious about these questions, then you should watch our previous video where we talked about the Roman conquest, the birth of Lusitania, and the enduring influence of Roman culture in Portugal, and the Lusitanian War led by the legendary Viriates as they resisted Roman domination in a quest for freedom. But today, we are going to focus on a more recent and tragic episode of Portuguese history that occurred at the dawn of the 20th century, when the Portuguese monarchy was in crisis and faced the rise of republican and socialist movements. This episode is known as the Lisbon Regicide, the assassination of King Carlos I of Portugal and his heir-apparent, Luís Philippe, Prince Royal of Portugal, by assassins sympathetic to republican interests and aided by elements within the Portuguese Carbonária, a secret society that opposed the monarchy. The Lisbon Regicide took place on 1st February 1908 at the Praça do Comércio along the banks of the Tagus River in Lisbon, commonly referred to by its antiquated name, Terreiro do Paço. The royal family was returning from a vacation in Vila Viçosa, a palace in the south of Portugal, and was greeted by a large crowd of supporters and opponents. As their open carriage crossed the square, two men emerged from the crowd and opened fire at the royal family. The king and the prince were killed instantly, while the queen, Amélie of Orleans, and the younger son, Manuel, were wounded but survived. The assassins Alfredo, Luís da Costa, and Manuel Buíça were members of the Carbonária and were immediately killed by the royal bodyguards. The Lisbon Regicide was a shocking and unprecedented event that marked the decline of the Portuguese monarchy and the rise of the Republic movement. It was also the result of a long and complex history of political and social unrest that had its roots in the 19th century, when Portugal faced many challenges and changes, such as the loss of its colonial empire, the industrialization and urbanization of its society, the emergence of new ideologies and movements, and the interference of foreign powers. King Carlos I of Portugal was the son of King Luís I and Queen Maria Pia of Savoy, and the grandson of King Ferdinand II and Queen Maria II. He ascended to the throne in 1889 at the age of 26 and inherited a troubled and unstable kingdom that was plagued by economic and financial problems, political and social divisions, and diplomatic and military humiliations. He was also a controversial and unpopular king, who was accused of being extravagant, corrupt, and incompetent. He was nicknamed the Diplomat or the Martyr, depending on the point of view. King Carlos I tried to modernize and reform his country by promoting the development of science, culture, and education. He was also a patron of the arts and a talented painter himself. He supported the establishment of the University of Lisbon, the National Museum of Natural History and Science, and the National Museum of Contemporary Art. He also encouraged the exploration and colonization of Africa, especially Angola and Mozambique, where he hoped to create a new empire and a source of wealth. However, King Carlos I also faced many difficulties and oppositions, both internally and externally. He had to deal with the rise of republican and socialist parties that advocated for the abolition of the monarchy and the establishment of a democratic and secular republic. He also had to face the pressure and influence of the British Empire that imposed its interests and demands on Portugal, especially regarding its African colonies. He also had to cope with the dissatisfaction and resentment of the people, who suffer from poverty, inequality, and oppression. King Carlos I tried to solve these problems by appointing João Franco as his prime minister. In 1906, João Franco was a conservative politician who had the support of the king, but not of the parliament or the public opinion. He proposed a series of reforms that aimed to strengthen the monarchy, improve the economy, and restore order and stability. However, his reforms were seen as authoritarian, unpopular, and ineffective, and provoked more resistance and revolt from the opposition parties, the press, the army, and the Carbonária. The Carbonária was a secret society that was inspired by Italian Carbonari who had fought against the Austrian domination in Italy. The Carbonária was founded in Portugal in 1822 and had the goal of overthrowing the monarchy and establishing a republic. It was composed of members from different social classes and professions, such as workers, students, teachers, journalists, lawyers, and military officers. It was also influenced by the Freemasonry, the anarchism, and the socialism, and had connections with other revolutionary groups in Europe and Latin America. The Carbonária was responsible for many plots and conspiracies against the monarchy, and had a key role in the Lisbon Regicide. It was also involved in the preparation and execution of the 5th October 1910 revolution that ended the monarchy and proclaimed the Portuguese First Republic. The Lisbon Regicide had a profound impact on the history of Portugal and on the fate of the royal family. The king and the prince were buried together in the royal pantheon of the House of Braganza at the monastery of São Vicente de Fora in Lisbon. The Queen Amelia of Orleans and the younger son Manuel, who became King Manuel II, fled to England, where they lived in exile until their deaths. King Manuel II was the last king of Portugal and died without heirs in 1932. The Lisbon Regicide also marked the beginning of the end of the Portuguese monarchy and the rise of the Republican movement. The Republican parties gained more support and popularity and organized a successful revolution on 5th October 1910 that deposed King Manuel II and established the Portuguese First Republic. The Republic was a turbulent and unstable regime that faced many problems and challenges, such as economic and social crisis, political and religious conflicts, and military coups. The Republic lasted until 1926, when it was overthrown by a military dictatorship that led to the Estado Novo, the authoritarian and nationalist regime of António de Oliveira Salazar that ruled Portugal until 1974. The Lisbon Regicide was a tragic and dramatic event that changed the course of Portuguese history and had lasting consequences for its culture, society, and identity. It was also a reflection of the complex and turbulent times that Portugal and Europe were living in the early 20th century, when old regimes and orders were challenged and replaced by new ones, and when new ideas and movements emerged and clashed. That's all for today's video. I hope you learned something new and interesting about the assassination of King Carlos and the ascension of King Manuel II and the monarchy in turmoil. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep revisiting the archive.